Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending PTA auditing. Everything you wanted to know about auditing and more. And when we start the recording, you will see an interpretation globe at the bottom, or globe, and that's where you will select that should you want Spanish interpretation. So we are ready to begin. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, you're going to, oh yes.
Can we have Bernice say this in Spanish on the English channel?
Yes.
Bienvenidos al entrenamiento de oficiales de primavera. Cuando usted empiece, el momento en el que empiecen a grabar, en la parte de abajo aparecerá un globo, el cual usted puede seleccionar para que pida que sea traducido a su idioma español.
Great. Thank you. We have Berenice that's volunteering to help us with our Spanish interpretation today. Very grateful for that. So as we play our pre-recorded sessions, please utilize the Q&A button for any questions that arise. We will do our best to answer them as Flora is presenting, but we will also stop some recordings and take some questions from you. So you'll have a couple different opportunities to do that.
Sorry, again, I forgot to do the sound button. Hold on, let me do this right this time.
This will be a unique training for you. So we're going to go to the how to conduct a financial audit and the purpose of an audit. And the main purpose is to reasonably ensure the integrity of the financial data and reasonably safeguard PTA assets. And what does that mean? Reasonably means that we can only do so much with what we have, with what we know. We're not guaranteeing anything as far as reports are concerned, but we're following policies and procedures to reasonably ensure the integrity of the data and PTA assets. PTA assets are usually just cash. So we are performing this audit in order to safeguard PTA cash, which is owned by the association. And so how do we achieve this purpose? One is to review compliance with PTA approved policies and procedures. Earlier today, the treasurers had their training and they learned the PTA policies and procedures that they have to implement in order to approve payments, prepare reports, these sort of things. And so it is our job as auditors to review the compliance of the treasurer and the board as far as these policies and procedures. It's important to note that the fiduciary responsibility is shared by all board members. It's not just the treasurer. So when we perform our audit, it's not just on the performance of the treasurer, but of the board members as well. Revealing areas of weakness or improvement. So when we go through our audit program, we may see that certain things are missing and that this may cause an area of weakness. For example, you may come across something like commingling of funds, what we call commingling of funds. And we may see this in our review by seeing that there is some activity that is not in the budget, or that there's a collection of funds and a check written to another organization, and this is not allowed. And so this is something that we might find out as we're going through our audit. Ensuring that the wishes of the association are being implemented. We must all know that the money belongs to the association. So we have to follow all the policies and procedures in order to issue payments, put on activities programs that have been approved in the minutes of by the association. So this is why minutes that we ask for is so important, because otherwise we don't know, what are the wishes of the association. So meeting minutes are very important. Ensuring transparency of board actions to the association and protect board members. again, minutes are extremely important in these meetings because something may occur, an activity, and someone say, who approved that? Why are we doing that? The president is doing her own thing, his own thing. This is not right. So the minutes where the decisions were taken will protect board members from any kind of perception of impropriety. And lastly, ensuring that external reporting requirements are met to protect the tax exempt status of the unit. This is one of the most important. PTA does not get a kick out of asking for reports or reconciliations from treasurers or units just for the heck of it. 90% of what the PTA asks for in these requirements that we're going to talk about is to satisfy reporting requirements from the IRS, the Franchise Tax Board, and the Department of Justice. So in order to protect our tax exempt status, all of these reconciliations and reports, tax returns must be submitted. Okay, so now we're going to go to the audit timeline. And the timeline is in your unit bylaws, and it's a mid-year and a year-end. Mid-year is December 31st, and year-end is June 30th. Our fiscal year is July 1st through June 30. When a check signer is moved and or added, and when a treasurer is changed, a check signer, for example, or the president, we need to make sure that what had occurred during a prior treasurer is checked, is audited, and that the new treasurer, for example, as a new check signer, will start fresh with a fresh balance and will be responsible going forward. When a bank account is closed, you want to make sure that that bank account is zero balance and where the money went in order to close that account. It should maybe go to a new account or maybe to a district if the bank account is closed, if the unit is disbanded. And lastly, a separate audit must be prepared for each bank account and for PayPal. So a lot of the units have opened up second checking or savings account for their e-commerce, but for each bank account, there should be an audit prepared. The reason why we say PayPal is because PayPal is different than Square in that the money is not automatically posted to the bank account. You have to prepare drawdowns to post to the bank account. And so there's a question of transparency because sometimes treasurers may not or board members may not draw down funds. They may keep it in their PayPal account. That's not correct. It needs to be drawn down at least once a month. Also with PayPal, transactions need to be posted to your manual books or to your financial software. And so until the drawdown is posted, income and the fee expense are not posted to your accounts also. Also PayPal, you may pay directly from PayPal. You're not allowed to do that. No one's allowed to pay anything through PayPal because we require the check authorization or EFT process. I have seen where there was a transaction that money was taken out of a PayPal account and put into a bank account that was not the unit bank account, and that was investigated. And so we need to be very careful when it comes to PayPal. And I would say ask for those PayPal monthly reports, and that will show you the fees, what was taken in, what was drawn down. And we need to be as much as zero balance as possible. Okay. So who conducts the audit? And this is written in your bylaws, and that would be you. And the auditor may be elected and serve on the board. Or if one is not elected, then the auditor would be appointed by the board and ratified at the first association meeting of the new year. Ordinarily, appointments are made by the president and approved by the board, but because the auditor position should not be in any way related to the president or check signers, the president is a check signer, so they're not allowed to appoint an auditor. So that's why the board appoints the auditor and the association approves that appointment. In this case, the auditor would not be a board member. So if the auditor is appointed and approved by the association, they would not be a board member. To be honest with you, I think the auditor should not be a board member because of the independence of the auditor, which I'm mentioning at the bottom there. The independence of the auditor is of the utmost importance. You should not have any kind of feelings one way or another. And so there's a lot of frank discussion that goes on in the board. And so if you are a board member, please bear in mind that any frank discussion or anything going on, you need to take that into perspective, that may affect your independence as an auditor. So you need to put that to one side. Okay. The auditor must not be a check signer or related by blood, marriage, cohabitation with anyone on the financial team. And if the auditor is not qualified, accountant or review committee is an accounting firm must be used, and we're going to talk more about that on the next page. And then the outgoing auditor is responsible for the June 30th audit. So just like the treasurer, treasurer has to prepare the year-end reports and tax submissions for the year in which they served, and the auditor is the same. However, if the auditor is unable to complete, that task, then a member of the audit committee may prepare the audit, or the outgoing treasurer should not participate. So the audit committee may prepare it, but not the outgoing treasurer. And so if you have an auditor that you've selected for the next year, they may do that also. If they're nice, they can do that. Okay, going now to the qualified accountant. And this is an insurance company requirement. It's on page 28 of your insurance guide, that a qualified accountant such as a CPA who has been trained or licensed to conduct audits and or review accounting records, and they do not need to be currently employed. So if you're fortunate enough to have someone in your unit who is a CPA or who has job training experience or license in the review of accounting records, they may be a qualified committee, and in this case, a review committee. They may be a qualified accountant, and a review committee is not necessary. Okay, if you have an auditor who does not qualify as an accountant, then you would have the audit review committee, which must be ratified at the association meeting. So again, the review committee would be appointed by the board, just like the auditor, and ratified at the association meeting. This committee shall be composed of the auditor and at least one other member of the unit, council, or district. So if you cannot find another member of your review committee, you may consult with your council or district to get someone to help you on that review committee. The committee scope of work is not specified by the insurance company, and so it's sort of open to interpretation of what the review committee may do. They do not have to redo the whole audit. That's not the purpose of the review committee. I would say at a minimum that the review committee would look at the beginning and ending cash balances, make sure those are correct between the last audit ending balance and then the current audit beginning balance. Verify receipts and disbursements, make sure those add up right. And also they may review findings and recommendations, maybe get a second opinion on what you feel it is a finding. But the scope of work may be indicated by input from the board or from the committee itself, but there is no set scope of work. So the forms and the reports. And so the first one we have, well, we have examples of it, is the audit checklist. And I think we'll go to the financial records provided, which is the next slide, and then we'll talk about it. So this is the audit checklist, and these are the financial records to be provided. And I would suggest, and I've separated it out because it's kind of like two different tasks. And so when you want to get to your financial records, you want to check off what you've received. I would say do this right away. If you cannot perform the audit right away, I would say do the checklist first, because it may occur that the treasurer says, I gave you that and you don't have it. You know, I've come across that, you know, quite a bit. And so there's kind of a, I want to say, a chain of custody issue. Ordinarily in the past, I would do it person to person. I would meet the treasurer and sort of check in what they're giving me. And so we agree on what we have. But that may not be possible. An example that I might give is that the treasurer gave me a book with minutes, and the title of the book was 2019-2020 minutes. Well, inside the book was 2018-2019 minutes. So you want to make sure that you check all of that out. And if there is a question, email them, do everything in writing for obvious reasons. So if you're missing some documentation, you want to maybe email them that, you know, something is missing, you may give them another crack at it, or you may just take what you have and proceed with the audit. When you're preparing the audit, I would not say that, for example, treasury reports were not prepared, because they may have just left them out. So I always give them the benefit of a doubt, and I would say treasury reports were not submitted, for example. Okay, as far as the IRS forms, you're just verifying that you got them. You're not verifying any information on the forms themselves. If there's an issue on the forms, the IRS is not shy to let them know that if there's something wrong. I also want to draw your attention to the Treasury Reports Board and Association. At the association board meetings, treasury reports are to be presented and to be attached, but we also want a monthly treasury report, and that's not mentioned here, and that's important, and we're going to go over that later in this presentation. Okay. So we're going to go also over the source documents, which is the cash verification forms and the authorizations for payments and that sort of thing. Okay, here is the portion which I like to call the action plan, or the audit program. This is very important for treasurers to have. This is like the test in advance when you were in high school and you love that teacher that gave you the test in advance. It would be good if you make sure that your treasurer has this form if they don't already know of its existence, because this is covering at least 90% of their training. These questions that you're asking, they should know. So findings should not be a surprise. And I suggested to treasurers that maybe they take a look at it once a month to make sure that they're on the right track. Okay, so under bank reconciliation, I do have an example of a bank reconciliation. We're going to talk about that later. But this is the second insurance requirement. The first one is the review committee, and the second requirement on page 28 of your insurance guide is that a bank reconciliation is prepared monthly and it's signed by the preparer and the reviewer. So that's very important that you see that particular document, and I have an example of that later also. You come across some units who want to combine the treasurer's report and the bank reconciliation, and that never works. And so we want to make sure that they have two different reconciliations and bank statements. So the membership would be the membership that is actually received at the school site. It does not include electronic membership or totem. So in this particular section, we want to make sure that whatever money is received directly, that the per capita or the portion owed to council, district, state, and national is forwarded to your council, or if you're out of council, to your district. So that would be an audit finding if they're not keeping up with remitting those memberships to the next level. Okay, and then we have our examples of authorization for payments and treasurer reports. So I think we'll go, this is the cash verification form, which is what we're supposed to be reviewing. I've included one that has a startup cash, only think because I think that's important. There's some issues with startup cash. Sometimes the unit deposits the startup cash with the income made, let's say at the carnival. And so this one should not be combined. A separate cash verification form must be submitted when you're returning or when they're returning a startup fund. So I think it's important that we know what that startup fund is. And I've written here, startup portion above is optional, but may be helpful in returning and establishing future change funds. So you may have a carnival committee the following year who may say, oh, gee, what kind of change fund did they use last year? So I think this is helpful information. Also, the cash verification form must be prepared for each activity. So you can't combine memberships, carnival, book fair. You should have a cash verification form for each activity. And never sign alone or never count alone. So you always have to have two signatures. People should not be counting money by themselves. So sometimes you have initial two counters. They have to sign that they have counted the funds. Let's say at the carnival, they count the money and there's two signatures. More often than not, that deposit will go into a cash box because they're not, or a lock box, because they're not probably going to go to the bank right away. And so when the financial secretary or the treasurer or whoever is supposed to make deposit to the bank, you should have two more signatures because you never count alone. And if the deposit is in the lockbox, you want to make sure that whoever deposits the funds counts it again because it may be different. The count may be wrong and they'll say, well, you took 20 bucks. So you want to make sure that everyone is protected by two people counting at the same time. I also want to say that checks do not need to be copied. We know that checks are online with the deposits, and so we don't want people to take time to make copies and then not have enough time to make the deposit. So that is the cash verification form. And the other source document is the payment authorization request for reimbursement, and otherwise known as the check request. And we're going to look at this form and we're going to make sure, and we have a graphic in our next page that shows exactly what to look for. I've put over here no personal gifts. We want to make sure that no gift cards are purchased but with PTA funds. That's a big no-no. And that happened quite a lot at the end of last year when the schools were closed and they didn't know what to do. And so schools purchased gift cards, and that would be a finding because those should be donated. They should not be purchased by PTA funds. And the two required signatures, and we'll go through this again, is the president and the recording secretary. We have lines for the signature of the person submitting it and the chairperson. Those are nice to fill out, but they're not required, so it would not be an audit finding if those are blank. Okay. And so now we're going to look at, can we write this check? And this is a great flow chart, and this will help you a great deal in following what's supposed to be done in order to write a check. And I've also want to say that this same procedure could be followed for processing an EFT. If a payment is made through a bill payment process through the bank like Zelle, we still need the same approvals and requirements and procedures before, not to write the check, but to approve the transfer. So with that in mind, we're talking about the check and the EFT. So the first box is has the expense been approved in the budget, and we know, and you will require a budget from the treasurer in order to review the budget to see that it's approved in the minutes and that this is a particular approved activity within the approved budget. If it is, and let's go through all the yeses first, and then we'll go through the nos. Has the expense been authorized by the association? Again, this would be in the minutes. And you're going to see what we call release funds. They should be, there should be motions in the minutes that releases funds, because we know that a budget is a plan, it changes, but money needs to be in the bank before you start spending it. So while we may say, oh, we're going to spend $60,000 this year, that doesn't mean $60,000 is in the bank and that everybody can run around and start buying things. So we release funds saying, yes, money is at bank. Yes, you can start spending it. And that's why the recording secretary signs the check request, because she is verifying that the release of funds and the approval of the activity is in the minutes and has been done. Then we go to has a completed payment authorization form with receipts submitted, and we can also say the EFT form. Has that been submitted? And that's on page F52 of the CAPTA toolkit. And so we want to make sure that form has been completed, which is the form that we just saw, with the attached invoices and receipts. These should be originals. But I know purchasing offline, you can, print an invoice or receipt. If that's correct, then has a payment authorization form been signed by the president and the secretary? And we've talked about that on the form. Those are the two required signatures. And that would be a finding if those signatures are not on there. And then if that's all complete, you can write this check or make the electronic funds transfer. Now going up to a no, if the expense was not approved, has the expense been approved by the board? And so there's, in your bylaws, there's a section that the board is able to approve a budget based upon a board recommendation in between association meetings. So we know some units don't have as many association meetings as, like once a month. They may not have it once a month, and something may come up. This is a purely exceptional basis that should not be the norm. In the bylaws, you will see that the amount to be budgeted between association meetings would be $500 if you have 8 or more meetings, $750 if you have 5 to 7 meetings, and $1,000 4 or less meetings. So the fewer association meetings you have during the year, that amount goes up. So if that has been authorized by the board, if it hasn't, you're done. There's nothing can be done. You need to start over and get all those authorizations. If that's been done, then you go back to the yes, as far as the other process is concerned. And then we'll go through the normal process, as we've already talked about. Okay. So as far as the audit checklist, also coming back to the audit checklist, just a few things. The audit program, the action plan, just some advice on how you may want to approach that. You may want to check off items as you go along. That would be perfectly fine. And also the order of the questions, you may take them in different order. Sometimes we have the treasurer books by document type. I'm sorry, Lena, by document type, or sometimes by month. So this is how you would review the documentation. And I want to make sure that you know that the auditor does not make corrections to the documents or reports. So if documents or reports prepared by the treasurer are incorrect, you do not correct them. You make a finding or recommendation, a separate report, but you do not go on the reports themselves and make any corrections.
Okay, Lena, are you there? All righty.
Yes, I am.
Okay. You're invisible is all.
Yes, I am. I'm sorry. I see we have a couple questions. Flora is answering the one from Michelle about the request for reimbursement. Oh, do you want to go ahead live and answer that one, Flora? Oh, you're muted. Sorry. Okay, start again. Get a unmute. Okay.
I got it.
There you
Okay. Sorry. Okay, so the cash verification form should be signed by the counters. And at least one counter has to be a board member and one may be an association member. So at the 2 points that you're signing cash verification forms, those would be the 2 counters. Whereas the check request or check authorization must be signed by the president and the recording secretary.
And then will you review why we do not purchase gift cards?
It is the PTA policy that gift cards should be donated. It's also involving the IRS. The IRS considers gift cards as compensation. We do not want to get into, a situation where, the IRS tax returns need to be affected by the amounts of gift cards. So that may be another reason, but it is a PTA policy that we must adhere to.
Personal enumeration, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions right now that you've thought of, didn't want to take the time to type in?
I
You
see
can-
someone has raised their hand. Let me-
Okay, you want to unmute yourself?
Lisa Trujillo. I've,
Hi.
yes.
Hi,
perfect.
Lisa, what's your question?
So you mentioned that the checks for reimbursement need to be signed by the secretary and treasurer.
No, the check requests are signed by the president and the recording secretary.
And nobody else?
You can, if your unit wants, you can have the program chair or the person requesting the money to sign. There are lines for those, but those are not required for the purposes of the audit. The auditor only needs to see the recording secretary and the president.
Right. And nobody that is receiving a check for reimbursement needs to sign their own name. Is that correct?
It would usually, if you look on the form, there is a line for the requester, which may be what you're saying. As I said, the unit may require the requester and the chairperson to sign, and that's fine, but it's not required by PTA policies and procedures.
All right. Thank you.
You bet.
And then, Flora, there's a question about document findings. When you're referring to your document findings, can you explain what that is?
Yeah, in the second part, I explained that a little bit more thoroughly in the findings and recommendations, and I do give an example of a finding of how you would write it, how you would not personalize it, that sort of thing. And we're going to go through that in the second part.
Great, good questions. Never a dumb question.
Are there
all
any,
learn.
are there any that were answered already in the Q&A box that you think are worth bringing up for the translation side?
Oh, there was one. It's kind of interesting. Do we need an auditor if we have a committee?
Yes.
And yeah, and the auditor must be a member of the committee. And you do need a person that is assigned and approved as an auditor because they need to sign the audit as the auditor. So even if you have a bunch of people wanting to get together to be a review committee, one person will have to be named as the auditor. There was another question if you don't have an auditor, and I said that please consult your counsel. If you're out of counsel, consult the district on how that audit may be prepared.
And then following with that train of thought, and Mary, we're going to let you speak in just a minute, but just staying with that, the idea about the audit, I replied in the Q&A that it does not seem to be the best use of PTA monies to pay for an outside auditor. Generally, all of us are doing our jobs as volunteers, whether it's the treasurer or the president or the recording secretary, and we're not paid for our services. But now that the insurance company has required us to have an audit review committee, there still is no reason to hire someone to pay for the services to have a professional auditor come in. As Laura's explained, that's not, the professional guidelines of financial auditing are different from the requirements of PTA auditing. And it's a lesser extent. And therefore you just can have the either appointed or elected officer as the auditor, and then you have a review committee. So there's really no need to expend PTA monies for that. Okay, so where is Mary?
I'm here.
Go ahead with your question.
Looking at the can we write this check flow chart, it mentions the completed authorization form with receipts attached. Does that suggest that, I guess, a payment has been approved and somebody would have made the purchase using like their personal funds and then are requesting a reimbursement from the PTA?
Laura, do you want to?
Oh, I'm
If that
sorry.
makes sense.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
Oh,
I
that's
was
okay.
reading the questions in the
Sure.
thing, sorry.
So with in the can we write this check flow chart, it mentions has a completed payment authorization form with receipts attached been submitted. Does that suggest that like the board has approved the purchase, but then like maybe a board member went out and made the purchase, say with their own cash or credit card or whatever, and then
Right.
are requesting reimbursement that way? Is that how that
Yes.
works?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Everything is approved and then the person may go out and purchase it and then request reimbursement.
Okay, so it doesn't necessarily, so a payment for a good or service for the PTA doesn't always have to be a direct payment from the PTA. It
Right.
can be somebody that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. Ordinarily, direct payments would be to a vendor that gives you an invoice. And
Okay.
that would be, for example, an example of a payment outside of, a volunteer making it.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry,
Great.
thank you.
Okay. Oh, no, that's okay. Thank you for the clarification.
And then
Sure.
Susan has a question. The June 30th audit is what we call the year-end audit, and we also have a mid-year audit. So thanks for that question, for our clarification. So there are 2 audits required a year. The year-end, which is happening right now, and then you will have a mid-year audit where you would audit the books from July 1st through through December 31st, and then rolling into the end of the term next year, next June 2022 would be the next audit. And there are, the only differences are the dates covered. And you would still need an audit committee unless the person is a qualified accountant. So Flora is a qualified accountant. Even though I've been auditing books for a bazillion years, I am no longer considered a qualified a person. I've never been professionally trained. I've been trained in the School of Hard Knocks. So, but if I audited the books, I would have to have an audit committee. And that's just one more person that's not a check signer, review my work. Okay, Erica is asking, is saying our PTA hires an outside accountant and handles our books on a monthly basis, which has been the case. So I review this as PTA auditor. I don't know. I have a question regarding the 5-minute audit, which I've been doing for the past year. I've heard this needs to be a separate position from the auditor. No, it does not. There is although I don't know that we talk about the 5-minute audit in our presentation. It's on the CAPTA website. It is a suggested thing that one should do every month. It's just a quick, hey, are we handling our books in the manner in which PTA wants us to do, so that it kind of makes the ending job of auditing that 6-month period easier, because you've been making sure you're doing your books, you're reporting correctly monthly. If that, I think, is what maybe Erica's referring to. And that can be done by the auditor, whoever's whoever's reviewing your bank statement monthly, reviewing your bank reconciliation monthly. That person can perform a 5-minute audit. As to hiring an outside accountant that handles our books, I don't know, Flora, do you want to field that one?
Well, that seems like, well, that's the choice of the association if they want to do that. But I'm hoping the amount isn't excessive, that you're using funds that maybe can be done by a volunteer. Just want to make sure the outside accountant isn't performing the audit function also. But if the association approves that expense, I guess that's okay.
Yeah. So hopefully everybody understands, if you have an outside person handling the bookkeeping of the PTA, which is what the financial secretary and the treasurer do, they cannot handle auditing the books. They'll look back and see, is the bookkeeping being done properly for the PTA? I also get concerned about that as to, you're supposed to have an elected treasurer, elected president, and an elected recording secretary. And what is the treasurer doing if you've hired somebody to, quote, handle the books? Erica, you might want to, send a private message to us and ask them to clarify.
Because I guess we would need to know what's the scope of work of the outside accountant. What are
Yes.
they expected to do, as Lena said, as opposed to our volunteers who have their jobs also.
Mhm.
There's another question about leniency for COVID, and there has been arrangements made for not having, you can scan and email things where you couldn't use to do that before. But as far as leniency, the insurance company is not being lenient with the PTA. The requirements are still the same as they were pre-COVID, post-COVID. So policies and procedures are in place based upon good business practice and the insurance company, and we cannot be lenient for that reason. But there has been some, things such as scanning and emailing and not having original things.
Yeah,
to
we,
help.
we are still dropping things off at each other's porches
Yeah.
to obtain signatures for check requests, and actual checks being signed. And so, no, there's no reason to have any kind of leniency on reporting and that type of thing too.
Yeah, my neighbors are convinced I'm running a drug cartel off my porch because people are coming, going, dropping off things, picking up things. But yeah.
All different times of the day.
Yeah, right.
Okay, then there was another question.
Actually, Lena, I'm going to jump in and say maybe we better play
Okay.
this segment, and
All
then
right,
we can
will
stay
do.
after for questions, but I just want to make sure at least the recording gets played within our time limit.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. First one being the treasury report. These are reports that you're expected to look at and review and to test compliance. And these are on the audit program. And so I try to make as many examples as possible of transactions that you may come across so that you can be prepared and you can refer back to how these transactions should be reported. As I said earlier, units don't quite know the difference sometimes between treasury reports and bank reconciliations. Those are two entirely different reports. Sometimes they try to combine the treasury report with the bank reconciliation, so they won't report a check on the treasury report until it's cleared the bank, and that's not correct. The treasury report is to report disbursements and incomes as they occur, regardless of the bank. Okay, so in our example, and I tried to make all the examples with the same numbers so you can make those relationships. The beginning cash balance, $42.50, and then we have the membership dues, $10. And so we want to split that in the treasurer report between what is owned by the unit, the membership dues, and what needs to be forwarded to the next level. So you'll see the $49.50 under income for the unit, because that's unit income. But a little bit further down, you'll see the $50.50 under funds not belonging to unit income. And that's what's going to be sent forward to the council or to the district if you're out of council. And you'll see at the bottom there, funds not belonging to the unit expensed, and that's the check that's written to the council or to the district. Those should equal 0 or close to. If you see that income collected is quite a bit more than the expense, then they're not remitting memberships, and you want to investigate when those memberships were collected and when they're remitting them. They should be doing it at least once a month. Okay, and then other types of income is, fundraisers, family dinner nights. Transaction number is important, and I know in financial systems, they are automatically generated. But if you're using some manual reporting or Excel, I would suggest that you use transaction numbers. Those are your best friends, as far as recommending maybe to the treasurer that they use transaction numbers, because that's easy to follow. And then we have bank adjustments. So we have our source documents, which are cash verification forms and check requests and EFTs, but then we have bank adjustments that do not start or emanate from the unit, but rather emanate from the bank. And examples of these are total memberships. So you want to make sure that the treasurer records the total membership. Also square sales, and lots of times treasurers will record the net at the bank as the income, and that's not correct. And you may want to inform them of that for the square sales, the gross income is posted as income. And then you'll see below in transaction number 502 where it says square sales fee, that's where you'll put the fee. The fee is an operating expense. So you should not reduce the gross sales by an operating expense. So you may see that, and we'll see in the bank statement that shows $73.50 as a income, as a deposit, but it should really be split up between gross sales of $75 and the fee of $1.50. So you want to make sure that they do that. Another type of bank adjustment may be a correction to a deposit. So you want to make sure they write that down. Some units, they don't write down, like corrections, or, maybe a check, as we're going to talk about, the bond is not cashed correctly. You want to make sure everything is accounted for. Also with Amazon Smile, and then with return checks, you want to make sure that it's posted as a reduction of income, the amount of the check, and then the check fee is reported as an operating expense. Okay. And then going into expenses, you want to make sure, again, check numbers are sequentially numbered, that they're all accounted for. Sometimes they leave out a check that has been voided. It would be good to record that check as a 0 or something in order to accommodate that check. Again, we're going by our sequentially numbered. We want to make sure every number is accounted for. So I put in here an example where the check was voided, but it does equal 0. And then the check was reissued. Okay. And they need to remember to put the bank service charge. If there's any bank service charge, that's an expense that has to be included also. And also, sometimes there's a difference. They cash a check at the bank for a different amount as what we wrote the check for. And if it's a small amount, we'll just record it as an additional expense or a reduction expense. It goes either way. So for this example, there was a check, let's say $3.25, that was cash for $325.45. We want to put that 45 cents as an additional expense. If the difference is appreciable, and that's up to the treasurer or the board or whoever is saying, if $5, whatever is appreciable, they may pursue that with the bank. But a small amount, we may just record that. Okay, so I want to draw your attention to the ending cash balance of 9626.85 because you're going to be seeing that number in the next in 3 reports, this report and the next 2 reports. And this is what I want to emphasize. It's all the same data. When you're looking at these different reports, the bank reconciliation, treasury report, ledger report, it's just all the same data. It's just presented differently. So you want to make sure that all of those amounts reconcile, that it's the same. And then someone say, oh, how come you have to have so many reports? Because it was for different purposes. So each report has a different purpose, but of course the data is the same. Okay, so the 9626.85 we're going to be seeing in the bank statement. I prepared a bank statement sample. Lena, we want to go to the next slide. Thank you. The bank reconciliation report. So I prepared a bank statement of what it might look like, and then I put at the bottom the bank reconciliation. So you'll recall the beginning cash balance of the treasury report was $42.50, but the beginning balance of the bank statement is $4,500. And we know the reason for that by looking down in the outstanding checks portion, down below above the signature, $250 was not cleared by the bank, and it was an October check. So we know that beginning balances for the treasury reports and bank statements may not or probably won't be the same. And we know it's because of outstanding transactions. Okay, so we see in the bank statement, we see the $100 for the deposit, and that's for membership, and they don't care about our split, so they just record it as $100. And then you'll recognize the other deposits. And for the square sales, you see the $73.50 we were talking about. That's how they would record it, but we want to make sure that's split out. And then the other Amazon Smile and deposit correction that we made. And under check 3058, you'll see they cash it for $325.45. Ordinarily, treasurers, may not record again that 45 cents, but we want to make sure that it's recorded. So they should be checking the checks and see if the checks are actually cleared for the exact amount of what we expect them to be. Okay, and then we talked about the check fee and the you'll see the return check amount of $50 is posted as a debit on the bank statement, but it's a reduction of income on our treasurer's report. Okay, and then the bank reconciliation itself, again, a requirement of the insurance company on page 28 of your insurance guide. And there we would start with the bank balance. And so we'll see the ending bank balance at the top there. We're bringing that down to $13,626.85. We're deducting outstanding checks, and there's your $9626.85. That should reconcile to the treasurer's report. And then we have our prepared by and reviewed by. This is required. Signatures are required. Otherwise, that would be an audit finding. And the reason why we do the bank statement reconciliation also is because of stale dated checks. If we never do a bank reconciliation, we assume all checks have been cleared, and that's not the case. And we've come across a lot of units who do not do the bank reconciliation, and they have checks that are a year old. Talking about stale dated checks, if it's a check is 3 or 4 months old, you may want to pursue that with the treasurer to see if that should be voided and if it should be reissued or not. Okay. And again, we want to make sure that we have all our check numbers accounted for so that there's no gaps, because gap may indicate checks are maybe lost or missing, or it may be an issue. So we want to make sure that we look at that. Okay, and then for our ledger report, this is a report that's required, and it's mainly to be used to prepare taxes. The headings on this particular report can vary. These headings just so happen in my example to correspond with the UTAR annual report, but it doesn't have to be. it should be maybe in accordance with your tax categories. For example, program services and special events is interchangeable with fundraising and donations. Those would be tax categories that would need to be reported. This particular report accounts for all of the income and expense, let's say for the 6 months in the audit period. Just so happens I'm doing it for 1 month just because that was my example, but usually it will be for the 6 months. And you'll see at the bottom, and you'll recognize the 4250 as the beginning balance of the treasurer's report. You will also remember the receipts and expenses that were recorded. And there's our 962685. Okay. You may consider also if they prepare it in order to prepare another Department of Justice report, they may use different categories. But we just want to make sure that the ledger report is up to date for the 6 months and it reconciles with the treasurer's report and the bank statement, bank reconciliation. So our next item is the audit report. And so I have a narrative that you can look later at. I'm just going to go through it, but we can look at the audit report to see how that's prepared. It is prepared by the auditor, so you will prepare this report. And the IRS EIN is usually a 9-digit number that you're looking for. Ordinarily starts with 95, but it could be different. It would be, in our case, 33rd District. And they used to have account number, but they didn't want to have that information on the form, the CAPTA. So they revised the form, and you may give the account number a nickname like checking, savings, checking to, whatever you want to call it. And then the e-memberships year to date would be total square, anything that's processed through a financial payment processor. And then you would need a total year-to-date membership and the amount, and you should check this, make sure that they're collecting the correct amount according to their bylaws, their latest approved bylaws. I know sometimes a unit will agree in an association meeting, oh, let's collect $10 instead of $8, and that has not been approved in the bylaws. So that has to be in the bylaws. So if they're collecting $10 and their bylaw says $8, that would definitely be a finding, and they would have to update their bylaws. Okay, and then you have the dates covered. This is just a month for my example, but it would be usually January 1st through June 30th, or July 1st through December 31st, or any period that we're doing extraordinary because a treasurer has left or a bank account has been closed. And there's our familiar 4250, which is a balance on hand at the beginning of the audit period, and it's the beginning balance of your treasurer's report. And the receipts and disbursements, as we have on our ledger report, is the same. And so there it is again, the balance on hand, the 962685. So all of those, you want to make sure all of those reports reconcile to the same amount. The bank reconciliation portion is just merely the last bank reconciliation. So if this is a December 31st audit, it will be your December 31st bank reconciliation. So you don't have to go through all your bank reconciliations. It's just the last one that you have. And then you'll see 13/6/2685, which you've shown previously, and with the 2 outstanding checks, and there's the 96/26/85. So the starred amounts, the balance on hand as of well, in this case, 11/30/2019, it has to equal the balance in the checking account as of 11/30/2019. Okay, and then we have the next portion is your assessment of the report that you have prepared, the findings and recommendations. I think we need to look at the, this is a revised report, the one on the right. So let's use this one now because we've used the figures for the last one, but this report has been revised in the last month. And I did get a copy of it and I wanted to show it to you because this is the new report. And it's pretty much the same, except when you go down to the balance in the bank account instead of the balance in the checking account. They changed that, and that's correct because it could be a checking account, a savings account, you know, whatever. And also they've added a category as far as assessing the findings and recommendations, which is really good because before you would have to say correct or substantially correct with findings. And it wasn't quite fair because their reports or information could be correct and still have some minor findings. So it's either correct with no recommendations, which everything is perfect. It could be correct with attached recommendations, and these could be like minor recommendations. For example, they didn't keep a running total of the checkbook. The information was correct. The procedures were in place. You know, the reconciliations were correct. It's just that they didn't keep a running total of something, or they missed you know, some signatures. So this is a good category to add. And then substantially correct with attached recommendations. This is when there are some issues. And even though most of the information may be correct, but there's still weaknesses that has to be reported. And so this would be substantially correct. Partially correct, this is when a lot of information is missing. We're not able to put the pieces together. And so we're saying that what we got is partially correct, but we need more information for a more thorough audit. And then the last one is just incorrect. They just didn't turn in anything. Their reports are wrong, nothing matches, and that would be incorrect. Okay, and so at the end there, we have the date completed, and you'll see the auditor is a qualified accountant. If the auditor is qualified, put yes. You don't need a review committee. If no, then you would have to have the review committee sign the form. Okay, and let me see. So I want to talk a little bit about the audit and findings and recommendations report, which is what I'm talking about, the audit narrative. And the findings and recommendations, it's based solely on what you receive. Here we can go to the next. I think it's the next one, page 21. Well, I've already covered that by just looking at the report. Okay, there we go. So this is just some information, the findings and recommendations is the auditor's opinion, but it's based solely on the documentation presented for audit. And so you're not reading any extra things into it. You're just reading the documentation that you received. If you did not receive documentation, you cannot assess it. And so there may be some written communication during the process. I wouldn't encourage that, but if there's some things missing, do everything by email. There's no text or phone calls or anything like that. Everything has to be in writing. And so, and this would be pertinent as deemed by the auditor. For example, you know, if you have all the treasurer's report, but somehow one is missing, we may assume, oh, you know, maybe they have, but it's just missing. It looks like they do it all the time. You may say, oh, hey, your treasury report, you have that for October. That's your discretion. And judgment may be exercised to report a finding based on the totality of the review or a pattern. For example, if they have 50 check requests and they were all signed by the president and the secretary, but you found two that weren't signed maybe by the secretary, in my judgment, I would say they've implemented policies and procedures. they're following them. This may be just one or two that they missed. Maybe you can draw their attention to it, but I don't think it rises to the level of a finding. These are volunteers. They're doing the best they can, and they get a little bummed when, you know, there's a small finding. So I would use judgment. If you feel that it is a problem and it's continuing, then yes, of course. But if it looks like it was just something that was accidentally missed and that procedures are in place, I would just mention it to them and not formalize it. A sample report, this is how you would write a simple finding. You can group checks together if there's multiple checks that that are missing something, but you don't use names, you don't personalize it. You may need to use a position. If you need to use a position name, then that's fine. So I would say a simple finding is check number 105 in the amount of $65 dated October 13, 2019 was not supported by receipts. And that's a little bit more important than just missing a signature, because this is safeguarding PTA assets, which is cash. So I would say always report a check that has not been supported by receipts, sure. And then your recommendation is all check authorization forms must include documentation such as receipts, invoices, which supports the amount of the check requested. Okay, so that's a simple finding and recommendation. And, you know, nothing personal, just a statement of fact, just what you have and what you've received and what you're able to discern from the documentation that you received. Okay, and the audit approval process. You may present the audit if there's the findings and recommendations that you feel that the president and treasurer should know in advance with the financial team. You know, you don't want to hit them broadside, you know, surprise them or anything like that. It is a courtesy to present the board, the recommendations and findings to the president and financial team first, just to discuss them. Nothing will change. You know, they can't argue about it or anything. This is just a courtesy to let them know what the report is going to look like. After that, then the audit and recommendations with the audit form is presented to the executive board. And this is where the discussion of finding and recommendations will occur. You know, the whole report and all of the findings are presented to the board for approval and the discussion at that point. The next part is the audit report only may be presented to the association for approval. So we're not giving the findings and recommendations to the association. And if they ask about it, ordinarily we would say that those, you know, recommendations and findings are being addressed by the board. So if they see on the audit report substantially, you know, correct with findings and recommendations, we will just give them that report and say that the board is addressing the findings and recommendations. And then the report after the association approval is submitted to the next level of your PTA, whether that's your council. If you're out of council, it would be to the district. If the auditor is not available to present the audit, which we've talked about presenting to the board and the association, then a member of the review committee may do so. But financial officers should not present the audit to the executive board and the association. They have a vested interest in the outcome. And so the president, even as a check signer, would not be the best one to do it. If the auditor is not available, it could be the recording secretary or some position like that. But it would be best that it would not be the financial officers for sure. Okay. Okay, now we're going to talk about red flags. So these are things that you can kind of look for that that may pose a perception or a potential for mismanagement of funds. And so we've already said we're missing receipts. That's an important part. And then we have a list going down where they're missing reports. That's something to look for, a low bank balance. And one officer who is the chairperson that signs the check request. They're the president, they sign that. They're check signers, so they sign the check and they're reimbursing themselves. So they're the payee and the payor. Not the best situation. So we want to make sure that it's not a one-man show, because that may lead to lack of leadership, which is also a reason for looking at whether the unit should be in business or not. One is mismanagement of funds, and one is lack of leadership. And so lack of leadership may lead to mismanagement of funds. Also, the importance of the meeting minutes. Those are so important because that memorializes what the decisions were taken by the association and the board. And actually, they're bound and kept forever. So they're pretty important. And we want to make sure those online payments have the prior authorization, and we've talked about that. And PTAs may not use debit cards, no debit cards for the PTA. Some things that I come across that you may want to be aware of: advances issued that are not subsequently cleared. I came across an advance and it didn't look like they were clear. So advance, let's say for a book fair where they were buying decorations and food and whatnot. And so they got a $300 advance. And it looked like the receipts came in for a separate check for $200. They reversed that check saying it was advanced, but I never saw where the $100, which was not spent, was returned, as an example. So you want to make sure that those advances are cleared, either with receipts or with return of a personal check. Events like book fairs and chocolates, maybe a chocolate fund where you give chocolate to the parents and then the money is returned. You want to make sure when you're looking at the financial reports that those figures make sense. Because I know I've seen in my travels where book fairs, they said the reports off the book fair machines weren't working. And so when I looked at the deposits for the book fair, it was a couple $100 less than what was reported on the book fair invoice as processed cash and checks through their cash register. So you want to be aware of things that look, they're not reasonable, that don't make sense, for example. And PayPal funds, and we've gone through the PayPal account situation where funds need to be drawn down on a regular basis. And the PayPal account should be reported to the executive board. Now, an important note here: if mismanagement is suspected, contact your next level PTA immediately for assistance. No accusations can be made, and do not handle this on your own. Make sure all appropriate documentation is available to resolve any errors or submit to the insurance company. So if you feel that something is amiss, and it may not be, don't take it on yourself to investigate. Remember I said earlier that we are not investigators. We are merely auditors. We identify areas of weakness. It's up to investigators to see if that's true or not. So make sure that you ask for assistance from your council, if you're out of council, your district, to help you resolve this, and have all your documentation in order to present to see if there's an issue or not. Okay. And financial situations to avoid. And school staff members should not be check signers, and a lot of school districts forbid their staff from being financial officers of an affiliated organization such as the PTA. There may be a conflict of interest in that particular situation, so they really do not want to be involved in that. So it's best if staff members, teachers, may not be in a financial position on the PTA. And then all PTA funded programs must be approved by the memberships. And we talked the PTA membership, and we talked about that being the association's money, not anyone else's money. And principals must go through the budget and approval process in order to request funds. And a current board may not encumber a future board. For example, a current board should not be signing contracts which cover periods of time in the future year. Check signers must not sign blank checks, obviously. And all financial reports must be attached to the meeting minutes to document the business of the membership. And that's in case also the financial reports beginning, ending balance and activity should be in the minutes in case those financial reports somehow get detached from the minutes. And if you need any further information regarding the audit process, or you can download the audit report and the checklist forms, go to the toolkit, TAPTA.org.
Wonderful.
Okay, so there was a question that came up, so I guess I wanted to make sure that we clarify that if you are a newly elected auditor, you're not going to be auditing this year's books, meaning 2020, 2021's books. You will only be looking at the records for the year for which you were elected, 2021, 2022. 2020's in there. I hope I said that right.
Great. Lisa, we have Teresita has a question to ask us. So I will unmute her.
Okay.
Teresita, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. In case that the audit is made, we have all these findings. Does the school, once you receive your papers back, do you fix all of those problems, and then you have like a second audit to audit the findings, or do you just forget about all that and then you start in the new audit, begins like all from zero? All of this should be corrected. I mean, I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
Yes. Yeah, if you have serious findings and stuff, first of all, auditors never correct any documents or forms or anything. It is up to the treasurer or the preparer of the documents to correct those. If there's serious findings and stuff, we do have the option of taking the books from the treasurer and stopping the operations of the unit until serious findings are taken care of. Yes,
But
but
let's say they're
ordinarily,
missing, I'm sorry, if they're missing like a page, or one of the forms that they didn't submit, the receipts they didn't submit for that check, it's kind of like, do we give them an opportunity to go and find it?
yeah, you
Okay.
can do that, and it could be up to the auditor to, they may want to follow up, and it's purely a helpful thing because the audit is a training tool also. So yeah, you may follow up, but if another audit comes around that it's the same findings, that's more serious because they have not paid attention, complied with the first audit. And so in your second audit, you would say, these are repeat findings, this is more serious.
Okay, but we don't go back to, let's say, to the first semester, to the first, to December's audit to check if they corrected from then on. We just
Not
start
usually.
anew. Okay,
Yeah,
so we
not
start
usually.
fresh and see if they have the same ones later.
Yes, yeah, you
Okay.
give them an opportunity to make those corrections and stuff. You don't, if you want to follow up, I mean, there's no law against following up if you have the
Okay.
time to do that.
Okay.
But if they do, you do start again, as you say, and if they're repeat findings, then that's more serious.
Okay, thank you so much.
You bet.
You. Are we allowed to request copies of historical audits to see examples within our unit?
I would say that would impair your independence and, as far as this audit is concerned, you're just auditing the period that is current, and we shouldn't be swayed by anything that's prior, So I would say you're looking at just the documentation that's submitted for the current audit.
Although you want to make sure that your audit begins, the beginning balance is the last audit's reported ending balance, correct? And so you may need to see the prior audits, and the auditor's book should be kept current where everybody's filing their completed audits in the book. I know at one time I needed to audit some books, and the prior auditor had missed some outstanding checks. And so that threw off the beginning balance or her ending balance and mine. And so we had to go back and we had to state what was in error in a prior audit. So
Yeah, I was thinking more of the findings and recommendations, but true, that's true, Lynette, that you want to make sure your beginning balance is correct.
yeah. Okay, the next question is, can I make a suggestion for new auditors? Can I make a suggestion? New auditors should partner with the previous auditor on their first audit? For a volunteer, there's a lot of information in this meeting and it can be overwhelming. 6 months from now, when they do the audit, they can feel lost. Oh, what do you suggest about partnering?
As far, you may want to train them, you may not look at exactly what's being submitted, and unless you want to be on the review committee. And if the auditor is new and doesn't have the experience, maybe you would like to be on the review committee and help them along. That could be.
And also, unit auditors can reach out to their council auditors. And the council auditors then can reach out to the district auditor for guidance, answering questions about how to proceed with an audit. There'll be an audit training in the fall. So look for that too, if you want to take another training and become aware. But yes, once you actually sit down and go through the books, that audit checklist is a real, it's like your map on how to proceed. So that's very, very helpful to utilize that, but also trainings are excellent to attend. And then there was a question about the recordings. Lisa, we're not certain when our district is going to be placing our recorded audits, recorded trainings on the website, correct? We don't know
That's
for
right.
sure.
I don't know.
So my suggestion would be check back periodically. Lisa won't even receive the recording of this until later this afternoon, once Zoom processes it in her computer, and then she has to submit it to our director of communications, and she's responsible to post it on the website. So I would probably suggest maybe not even through the weekend, maybe look for it next week, if not soon thereafter. And Jean, what did you want repeated?
Oh, she's raised her hand. Maybe that'll
Okay.
be easier. Oh,
Yes.
okay, you can unmute yourself, Jean.
So my question was, the unit that I'm in has 3 association meetings a year. So at the first association meeting, if they approve an audit review committee, is that good for the whole fiscal year?
Yes, that's for the whole year.
It's for the whole year, so we don't have to approve it every association meeting.
No, that would
Okay.
be a review committee, just like a position. It'll be for the whole year, any
Okay.
position, yes.
And then my second question is, if they, so the next audit is, after June 30th. So, so do they have to do a new audit review committee, or it carries over because it's part of the fiscal year?
Yeah, your review committee that you have appointed and you approved at your first association meeting will be for the whole year.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Flora,
Excuse me, I have a question. When you say the whole year, are you talking calendar year or are we speaking school year?
This is fiscal year, July 1st through June 30. So
Okay.
July 1st, 2021 through June 30, 2022.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
The, there's Elvia has her hand raised.
I think that was Elvia.
Was that
Yeah,
Elvia? Okay,
Yeah, I was
that
just
was it,
wondering,
sorry.
where can or who do we contact? If we, I know this is gonna be, and this is my first year coming up as an auditor, and I wanted to know, like, where else can we go for questions? I know this is really good and really thorough, but I know that once this is over and I start the new year, I'm probably gonna have more questions since this is my first year. Who or where can I contact for questions?
It would be your council auditor first, if they have an auditor. If not, then you can contact 33rd District Auditor. So you would
And
just
how
go
do we
down.
get a hold of them?
There should be a slide. The address is PTA 33RD auditor@gmail.com.
Can you
Putting it
repeat
in
that
the-
one more time? I'm sorry.
We'll
putting
put it in the chat.
There we go.
We'll
Okay.
put it in the chat as well as the phone number to our district office.
Oh, you have to say that because I don't have it memorized. Sorry.
Okay. It's 562-804-4519.
4519.
Yes.
And then you did give a website. Can you repeat the website again? That we could get information from?
Look in the chat. Lisa is posting the email address of the auditor for 33rd District.
Oh,
Talk
okay.
about the website. So capta.org has got all these forms and it has job descriptions for auditors. So that may be of assistance possibly.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's capta.org,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
and
in
then
the chat.
Lisa, could you also put in the chat though the district website? Because that's ultimately where our recordings will be posted.
Like that.
Yes, perfect, perfect. And then there's one remaining question. This was like a subsequent question to another a previous question. So the question is that the treasurer is the only one that makes deposits to the bank. I think the previous question was, can the financial secretary review the bank reconciliation? And so, sorry, there was a little breakup in the audio. The question is, can the financial secretary review the bank reconciliation? And I answered her, no, because the financial secretary makes deposits to the bank account. The reply was that only the treasurer is making the deposits to the bank. So my first, well,
So is the financial secretary handling the money at all? And if
exactly.
he or she is, then I would think they would not necessarily be the most
Yes,
objective person to be reviewing stuff.
yes. So hopefully that answers your question, Martha. And the next question, oh, just as a thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions? We are nearly finished with our scheduled time. Here, I do want to thank everybody for participating, putting aside a few hours to attend our financial trainings. I hope it's been valuable for you. Please remember that we are always available to help you with your questions and try to direct you in the right place to seek assistance. So I also want to thank Berenice Witt, who was our Spanish translator today, and then our team of financial officers, myself as the outgoing district treasurer, Lisa Uyamatsu as the incoming district treasurer, We had Jocelyn Cisneros, our outgoing PTA financial secretary, district financial secretary. Emmy may have been on. She's our incoming financial secretary, and Flora Farzad, our PTA auditor extraordinaire. So thank you very much for everyone for attending. If no one has any more questions, we will let you go get some lunch.
I have one last question.
Sure.
How do we contact you if we have any questions?
Utilize the addresses that we've posted. Maybe we'll,
Okay, so those are it for you. Oh, okay.
yeah.
And the phone number too?
The phone number is our district office,
Oh, okay.
and then she'll field the questions out to the appropriate party.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
I do
Sure.
see a hand up for Jennifer. oh, here we go. So if you have a question, unmute yourself.
Hi, I was just curious, is Flora, are you the auditor, district auditor for this next coming school year?
No, I've spent my 2 years, so I'm not able to do that, but I am the tax consultant if you have any tax questions for the
Awesome.
next 2 years.
Who, can I ask who is the auditor for the upcoming year? For district?
Lisa, the position is opened, is that correct?
I think the position is open, and I think Julie and the board-elect are going to be working on trying to fill that position. But in the meantime, you can go ahead and or you can call the office, and then she can route it to whoever can best answer your question.
Mhm.
But
Okay, great.
hopefully your council auditor is probably your first stop as
Stop.
far as answering questions.
Mhm.
So try that, and then if he or she can't answer your questions, then we're here at 33rd District.
Oh, awesome. Okay, I'm coming in as the council auditor, so that's why
Okay.
I'm asking about
Oh.
anything.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
so that's
Talk to
why.
yourself.
So, but I see, all of you and all that, and have the email address and all that. So
Mhm.
if I have any questions for you guys, I can
Yeah.
do that. Thank you
There-
so much.
You're welcome. So there's another question about what are the general tasks of the financial secretary? Michelle, I would first check with your unit bylaws. It generally states what the financial secretary is supposed to do. There's also a job description at capta.org of all the elected officers as well as chair people. And then it's up to your unit ultimately to decide who does what job. For instance, there was a unit prior that talked about the financial secretary did not make the deposits. The treasurer did. Well, in the units I came from, we like to segregate those two jobs because we like to have one person in charge of depositing the money separate from the person writing the checks. So that was just a checks and balance that our unit wanted to have. So start with your bylaws, look at capta.org's job description, and then discuss it as a board if it's still unclear as to what the roles of the financial secretary are. Hopefully that answered that question.
And Elvia has her hand up.
Great.
So go ahead and unmute.
Yes, when you say the council auditor, are you referring to the like the school council auditor? Or is that somebody different?
That's
Yeah.
someone different. That's not school site council, if that's what's.
Or the
being about.
PTA council? Is that when you say the council auditor, are you referring to the PTA council auditor?
Yes.
Yes.
Generally, our PTA units are organized by the school district geographical area, although we do have a council that is made up of several school districts. But so for instance, I come from Long Beach. So all of our schools that have PTAs are in Long Beach Council. And Long Beach Council elects an auditor to serve for its term. Does that help you with?
Okay, so let me get this clear. So, okay, so I'm coming in as an auditor for a PTA at one of the schools.
That's
So
all you okay.
if I have any questions, who do I ask?
So tell me what school district you're in.
I'm in the Montebello School District.
Okay. Lisa Hales from Montebello. So you would go to your Montebello council to ask your question, and if they don't have an elected office of auditor, well, Lisa, go ahead.
So yes, there is an auditor for Montebello Council for the upcoming term. I think she may even be in this webinar. But so yes, you would go to her first with questions, and then if she needs help answering any questions you have, because I think she'll be new at her job, then she can come to 33rd District, and then we can provide any guidance that anyone needs.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
Once you get once you do the audit, you turn back the audit report to the school. Do you turn it into the council? What is the next level? Once you finish with the audit, what should you do?
Once your board and association has approved it, then you would send it, email it to your council.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it goes first to the board. We approve, then goes to council, and then
the association,
and
and
then
then to the council.
oh, okay. Okay. See, that's good to know, because that's not what we did this year. So
Oh, not listening, not listening.
that's all new good. It's learning experience. This is
Absolutely.
so
Gotta see
good.
that. That's why it's
Yes.
important to go to as many trainings as you can.
That's why I'm
always
just a
that-
treasurer. I'm just a treasurer. I have been
Mhm.
for many years. A part of a PTA in different jobs, but at council as well. But I mean, I always say I learned something new, and I have today. And I even texted and asked if I could be in this one, because I didn't register to this one, but I felt that it was imperative for me to come and
Yes.
be with you guys, because I
Good.
mean, it's great information. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
You
Yeah, you
bet.
always learn something new depending on, the point of view of your job that you're coming from. And
Yes.
I still learn new things. So.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
definitely. Thank
All
you.
right. Well, I think that that covers our time. Again, we're available by email. Send in your questions, or good luck on your upcoming term or your outgoing term. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.